So hello you guys, welcome back to my channel. I need to bring the mic closer to me. So today's video is another fun chat interview style video. I got to chat to the lovely Aaron Mclane. He is the VFX supervisor on The Walking Dead. Super lovely dude. He shared some real fun kind of behind the scenes tidbits or favourite moments from his time on the show. And it was just so amazing to get to hear more about the universe and the world that we love that was created within The Walking Dead. So yeah, here is that video. Hey. So just to start things off, you are a VFX supervisor.
That is correct.
Now, for anybody who mightn't know, you want to maybe run through some of the main roles that you do, how you got into that kind of line of work, because it is quite specific.
Yeah, so VFX supervising is all about the computer effects. So everything that I work with is in a digital world, so all the computer stuff. So when you see a zombie's head explode, that isn't practical, that isn't a dummy with blood, that's a computer. You know, Shiva was a computer thing before my time, unfortunately. It wasn't cool to do the tiger, but that's all CGI, and everybody's familiar with CGI because Marvel is full of it. So if you've seen, you know, a Marvel movie, you see something that obviously can't be real, that's CGI, and that's what I deal with. VFX supervision, I got into it like a bolt of lightning. It was just super random. It's a very long story, but here's the short version is I lost my job. I quit my job, and I didn't want to go home without a job. You know, you go home to your wife, and you're like, hey, guess what? I don't have a job.
Do I have news for you?
So I could go get a meeting, and so I was going to go to the meeting. I show up, and it's the ABC studio lot, which is star-striking. I'm like, oh my god, it's the Disney lot. This is so cool. Yeah. And it's not a meeting. They're shooting. They are shooting the first day of Blackish for ABC, which is a huge sitcom. And they're like, are you the VFX supervisor? And I was like, yes, I'm the VFX supervisor.
Oh my god.
So I had been an artist for 7 years, so I knew what I was talking about. I wasn't like just completely making it up. But we had to advise on some green screen, some chroma screen stuff. And then they're like, great, that was awesome. You're great. Come back tomorrow. And I was like, oh, no. So I called the guy up, and I was like, hey, they want me to keep coming back. And he's like, well, I'm too busy. The show's yours. So suddenly I'm a VFX supervisor on the #1 comedy in America and had to figure it out. Like I said, I knew what I was talking about. It wasn't like I was completely new to the industry. I had been an artist for 7 years. I knew what we needed to do. Yeah. So it was just about being in charge of it. And that was trial by fire, but I pulled it off. And about 7 years later after that, I was on The Walking Dead. And here's a super funny story about Walking Dead. I started in practical effects. I wanted to be a makeup artist. I wanted to be a monster maker. I wanted to meet Greg Nicotero and work on monsters. And my first week in Los Angeles, I go to K&B and I walk in. I was like, hey, give me a job. Somebody give me a job. And they're like, what have you done? And I was like, nothing. And they were like, we can't give you a job, but keep knocking on doors.
Yeah.
And if you keep knocking on doors, something will happen. And, you know, in a roundabout way, about, over 10 years later, they came and knocked on my door to join The Walking Dead. So it's an incredible full circle journey. And this, dream job's a big word, but Walking Dead is a dream job for me. I get to play with zombies every day.
I can't even imagine. Circling back what you said about Greg Nicotero, I feel you on that, because I didn't always love zombies. I really hated them, but we'll get into that in a while. But once I started The Walking Dead like that, I met Greg at a convention, and it was like, I had everything planned what I was going to say, because like the art that goes into this show is insane. The artistry is so beautiful. So I was like, yeah, I'm going to tell him this, that, and the other. And then by the time I got up to him, I was just like, hi, I love your show, lovely to meet you, goodbye, and just left. And was like, fantastic.
When I got the job, he's like, come down to K&B and we'll chat. I want to meet you. I had already gotten the job, but it was just like, let's have lunch, let's hang out, let's get to know somebody I'm going to be working with. And I show up and he's talking to me, and I'm like, I'm in his office, and I'm like, hold on, I gotta put a time out. Can I just look? Because I'm distracted. He's got Godzilla over here. He's got the Herschel head on the wall. He's got this. He's got that. And stuff that you recognize. And you're like, that's that.
That you just know.
Yeah, you got a glove from Friday the 13th. Oh, man, you got, you have a Freddy glove from Nightmare on Elm Street. And he's like, yeah, it's the real thing. And like, can I put it on? So I'm going nuts. I was like, I literally can't talk to you because your office is so cool. And I'm just like, oh, what's it? Oh, what's what's that?
It's
So
like being in a toy store. You're like, I just want to look. I'll talk to you in a minute. Let me try on the fun stuff, please.
So he's like, okay, let's show you some things first. So he's like, here's a tooth from Jaws, and here's this and that, because he collects Jaws stuff like fanatically. It was crazy. So that was definitely a highlight. And I hadn't even started for real yet, but it was such a highlight. And then getting to work with him and becoming friends with him, and getting to just collaborate is so amazing and so much fun. And he's just one of those legends in the industry, so it's cool.
It must have been absolutely amazing, but I imagine it would have been terrifying at the same time, because you joined in season 9, I want to say.
Season 9 I came on, and my first weekend on the set, we are shooting at the Georgia State Capitol to film the museum scene where they crash through the glass, and that glass sequence is a massive sequence. If you guys remember 901, they're trying to bring a wagon across like a glass floor, and there's zombies under the floor. We're at the state capitol, and they're like, there's so many, don't touch this, don't go over here, don't go over there, and everybody's like, it's very intense, and it's the biggest thing I've ever done in my life, and the biggest VFX sequence that I've ever attempted to be a part of. And there isn't a glass floor there, it's a state capitol, so there's a regular floor there, and we have to VFX the zombies into the floor for all of this, and just trying to figure it out, and it's mind warping. Greg's directing, and all the cast is there, every single person that I'm like, oh my gosh, all these people that I've been a fan of the show.
You're like, be cool, just keep your calm, it'll be okay.
So I'm having to hype myself up, I'm having to get my head wrapped around the situation, trying to be an authority on VFX for this thing, and man, what a weekend. I got chewed out like 3 hours into the situation. I had our UPM yelling at me because I guess, for whatever reason, and it was just wild. We shot for like 24 hours straight, but we got it done, and it was amazing. And I think that sequence, I'm still super proud of it, and I think it turned out. But a funny story is, so they're all tangled up in rope, lifting this, sort of lowering this wagon down onto the glass, and I'm up there. It's the first chance I get to talk to Norman Reedus, and he's got the rope wrapped around. I was like, get your fucking rope. And he looks at me and is like, what? He's like, from Boondock Saints. And he's like, oh, yeah.
He didn't get the reference?
Not right away, because, like, we're talking stuff, and he didn't know why I'm, like, talking.
He was in, like, Daryl mode. He was, yeah.
He was like, what? I was like, and he's like, oh, yeah, cool.
All right, get your stupid fucking rope.
And I was like, that movie got me into, like, that made me want to make movies. Like, I'm here partially because of movies that he's been in. It's like that and Blade 2 made me want to do VFX, which is hilarious. So, Norman Reedus has been there for a while on stuff that I wanted to work on. So, yeah, that was my first weekend in The Walking Dead.
You must have absolute balls of steel, because one, like you said, such a big scene, such a big intro into the show, and then like that, if that was me, I just would have cried and left. I'd have been like, thank you for your time, I'll go home now.
I always want to feel like I'm a little bit underwater, because that's when you're gonna
push
do
yourself.
Your best swimming, it pushes you. And I get to a point like, I certainly was intimidated, absolutely, but I had already been through the hardest part, which was showing up and convincing people that this is, I am the person who knows what I'm doing, and I think we all go through that constantly. Like, our whole life, our whole career is going to be just assuring people that you're the person to put their confidence in. And so I had, feeling like getting the job got you there, then you just have to pull it off.
And you have to eventually believe that you do deserve to be there and you got it together.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and by the time we're blowing up the bridge and finishing the series, like, yeah, I got this. And I'm proud of all the stuff that we've done, my team's done. We're killing it. I don't want to brag, but I feel like the last few seasons we've been able to really do some cool stuff with the VFX.
I think you have every right to brag, because there has been some just hit you in the face insane moments. I went onto your website earlier, and I was having a little gander. I was looking through, and I don't know, is it just I didn't pick up on it or what? But you have these kind of like how it's done videos up.
Yeah.
And the one that got me and that made me feel dumb as fuck was the 9x5 bridge scene. So the bridge blows up and, you know, you got the Walker herd coming, all that. I didn't realize that the water had been edited in post, the herd, the colouring, the depth, obviously the bridge, you know, you watch it, you know, okay, big explosion, that's probably post. But the amount of effort that went in that I feel bad I didn't pick up on. You know what I'm saying? So for you, given what you do, I mean, it's your job. Scenes like that, I guess some of them are a given, that if you do your job right, the people won't pick up on it because it does look so natural.
100%.
But is the payoff more satisfying for scenes like that, or for the bigger, in your face, like, whoa moments?
50-50, it depends. So much of what we do is invisible, and it's like stupid stuff too. It's like, oh my gosh, there's a crew member just like, hey, I'm over here, and you got to paint them out, and it's so difficult because like you never plan that to be a VFX. That feels great when the scene goes off and you're like, I painted that crew guy out, that was awesome. But when you pull off a bridge sequence, everyone's talking about it, and that is you know, that's where the money went. When the money's on screen, I'm definitely more excited, because to see you guys get excited. One of my favorite things is when Skybound would release the compilations of the reaction videos.
Yep.
Because every week I got to see everyone, you know, that was my payoff, to see everyone be so excited about something that you did. And when they highlight a VFX part, and to see all you guys be like, hell yeah, woo!
Yeah.
And, you know, since we're still talking about 905, that was maybe one of my favorite ones to watch, because I was like, you guys are all crying, and I'm laughing because I'm like, ha, it worked, like we pulled it off.
You're like, yes, give me more of your pain. I love it.
Yes.
I did a good job.
Yeah, and then I start crying because I'm like, oh man, we did it, and we pulled it off, and it was such an emotional episode, but we did it, and I'm so proud of it. Although I will say, in what was it, 10/19 maybe? I don't know. Here's Negan. Mm-hmm. Like, they stopped doing the reaction videos, but 5 minutes into yours, you're like, I'm not going to comment on the CGI. And I was like, oh, attacked!
No! What scene was that?
He goes out to the Lucille tree looking for Lucille, and we weren't allowed to go anywhere.
Oh, yeah, because of COVID.
And you, not only did you spot it, but you called it out hard. I was like, oh, attacked!
No! See, with things like that, like, I know it was before your time, but with the deer that we don't talk about. We don't talk about the damn deer.
We don't talk about that deer.
I feel bad because, like, I remember when that came out, when the deer scene, it was like, oh, haha, like, clearly it's CG, and everyone was kind of having a laugh. But, like, I have talked to a lot of cast members, and I've met a lot of crew members as well. And you see that, like, so much love and effort goes into that kind of stuff. So I try, even like that, if there's something where I'm like, oh, well, clearly that's whatever, I do try to not pass judgment on it. Now I'm going to be even more careful, and every time there's an explosion.
No, because we watch. We do. We're big fans of... It's funny because you asked me to be on, but, like, I'm a fan of seeing what you guys do and what you do. Like, you know, that's exciting, and that's fun. And it's fun to be reminded that there are people who care about what you do. Yeah. And that maybe something that we did mattered, and because it is super frustrating. It's a job. It's a dream job. I love it, but it's super frustrating. It's really hard. It's a really hard job. But when you see, you know, the reactions and people love it, you're like, man, we did something for somebody. We made their day. We made something happen that was exciting for them, and that feels great. So those reaction videos are important. So for you, and for, you know, the other people who do the reaction videos, keep it up, because it does mean something to some of the crew and some of the people who are involved, because that's just awesome to feel that love. So we appreciate that. I will give you some insight on the deer before my time, but here's what happened. The deer's not CGI. The deer's real. The deer is shot for a different plate, and then they changed it without enough time to go shoot a new deer or make a CGI deer. So basically, they went and filmed a deer in the woods. Yeah. And then from a certain angle, expecting it to fit together nicely. But then editorial changed the angle. Oh, fuck. And the deer doesn't fit, so he doesn't look right. And that's why it looks fake. That's why it looks so CG, is because it's a real deer shot for a different shot. And then it just never worked, and they didn't have enough time to fix it. And, you know, sometimes when the boat's going super fast, even though you're like, hey, guys, iceberg, They're like, make it work, and you just have to. And that's probably the biggest example of like they made it work and it didn't. You know, you were forced to use the cards you had, and you lost that hand. But it's unfortunate that is a legacy that will live on for like Walking Dead's VFX. But I think we also made up for it with the bridge and with the herds and throwing them over the cliff. I think we've done a lot of things to sort of show that there's still, you know, real power behind the VFX of this show.
I think when it comes to behind the scenes, there's so many different moving parts to it, and especially I wouldn't have ever thought that the deer was already done, and then you need to, you know, it needs to go into a specific slot or it won't work. So what happens then if you do have something already done, and for whatever reason something is changed or something's altered, or you're basically told, look, we've redone this. Can you not give your creative input and be like, listen, I don't think it'll look aces?
Yeah, I think we're better about that now. When I came in, I made sure that you know, somebody's going to hear about, I like to complain.
Yeah.
And you know, I think what happened last time was just like there was no time to change it, and the house of cards had already been stacked. And you know, it's just the way it happened. But you know, a lot of times I'll say, this is how we shot something. It needs to be this way. And 99% of the time we get what we need. We also have better budgets than we did back then. Very thin budget. Like, we don't have a lot of extra wiggle room, and we make that dollar go a mile. You know, we really do stretch. We really do stretch. It's unbelievable how much we make it work. But you have to have a lot of voice up front, though. Like when you're reading the scripts and you're talking about the scripts, you haven't even turned the camera on yet. You need to be loud about, this is what we need to do, this is how we need to do it, because inevitably you get there and they're like, oh, we can't do that, what now? At least everybody heard the plan, so now that you have to change it, you have more say, because they're really relying on you to fix the situation that's risen. I often equate what I do to picking the train wreck I want to clean up. So it's like we get there and it's like, hey, we have 10 minutes left. We're going to run out of light and we're shutting, you know, we're not going to shoot anymore. So that thing we said we were going to give you an hour to do, how do you want to do that? It's like, so you get to pick your mistakes and you get to try and figure out what's the best way to achieve something in the shortest amount of time and still get what you get and still do a good job. When we shot them all falling off that cliff, the 10/16 delayed finale.
Yeah.
We had 4 hours to shoot that. That should have been an all-day thing. But we had more scenes to shoot.
You just didn't have time.
Only had just didn't have time. So we then reshot stuff in LA. We went and did reshoots and then relied on a lot of really high-end VFX to kind of put it all together, and it worked. And that's one of those cases where we knew we could make it work if we did it right, and we're efficient about it. But man, that's hard. It's hard to figure out what you want to do when you're like, well, all that time we were going to do didn't work out.
We don't have it now, so what's the plan? Like, it must be frustrating because, like you said, you have to speak up. You got to be heard, because at the end of the day, if there's a fuck up, if there's a moment where something isn't as it should be, the heat then will fall on you guys, and it'll be like, oh, we don't talk about the CG deer or whatever. And like, I'd probably be a bit snappy as well if I was in that situation.
Yeah. That's the inside voice that I keep inside. Outside, I try to smile all the people. I was like, why are you so happy? We're like down to the bone. We're going a mile a minute. Why are you so happy? Because it's like, we're making TV. Because like, there's enough people being angry. You know, I'm just going to try and be happy. We'll smile. We'll laugh about it. You know, we have some stuff. The Locust. Can we talk about it?
I don't want to say anything is my favorite moment from more recent episodes. No, I don't, because like I have this horrible habit of, I just get so excited about whatever it is that I've just seen that I'll go, that was the best episode, my god, I loved it. And then the next one will happen and I'll be like, no, okay, this was actually the best one so far and here's why. But I feel like it's been a mixture of, like, I know didn't you change during the pandemic, how things were shot and how things were filmed? You switched? Yeah.
We had to do a lot of like distance and how we do things and how we arrive on set, and like a lot of checkups and zones, and it was wild.
So I think that, like, especially with the more recent episodes, for how he had to change and how he had no experience with going into that kind of world, like you said, with having to socially distance and be quite nervous, I would say, and unsettled, like, on set as well, because it's unprecedented times. For what you've done so far, you would not know that it was done during a pandemic. Like, I even find myself watching it thinking they didn't miss. I know that certain episodes were postponed or delayed, but you didn't miss a beat.
Thank you. Yeah, that was the finale was so hard because we shut down. Because when you work in a VFX house, it's literally like 100 people in like a warehouse working on computers, elbow to elbow. You can't work like that when the pandemic hit. So we had to scramble and figure out how to work from home. And the technology didn't exist yet. So literally people are creating things so that all of our industry could keep going. There was the technology to check in on your desktop, but like throughout the pandemic, how to work from home has just exploded. That technology appeared. People went crazy figuring it out. But like we had to finish that sequence from a distance, and it was very difficult to do. And it wasn't the best scenario ever, but we were able to, the teams, I have to give a huge shout out to Ghost Copenhagen, who did that sequence, and they figured it out, and they were able to make it work, and they were able to deliver the episode. And like, some of those COVID episodes that we started shooting right after, Here's Negan and stuff, are very small scope comparatively. It's like 3 or 4 people in a room.
Yeah.
That's how we had to start, because we were like, well, how do we do this? And because it's not just what you're shooting, it's behind the scenes. Everybody's wearing goggles and masks, and the crew would leave and the cast would come in, and then the crew, because you're trying not to be in close proximity to everybody at once. You're trying to stay in close proximity only to the people that are in your zone or bubble and stuff.
Yeah,
and that's tricky. And my wife had a baby while we were filming the one more, the episode with Gabriel and Aaron playing cards, and they get attacked by a Terminator.
No way.
Yeah, so I have a 1-year-old now. She's amazing, but yeah, we had a baby born just as the pandemic was going, and I was on set for 1 day for that episode, and then went to be with my wife to meet my daughter, which was awesome. But what a crazy time to have that happen, and then have a 1-year-old by the time we finish. So it's been just a wild ride, and everybody's kind of experiencing that in the weirdest couple of years I think we've all collectively ever had.
Well, it's certainly been a bloody wild one for you. Holy shit, I work from home. Everything I do is from home. And I'm there thinking, my life is so hard. My life is so stressful. Meanwhile, there's people like that have to figure out how to redo their entire job, have a little pandemic baby, and still just roll with it all.
Yeah, and then get back to set. And then, we still do a lot of posts. So I'm doing post remotely. I'm in Georgia, and post is in LA. So I'm on Zoom calls and shot grid meetings to approve shots and see them through. To get back to the locusts a little bit, so when you read a script like 11:16, and it's like, and then there's a swarm of locusts, and you're like,
there's a what now?
There's a what? And it's one of those things it's hard to plan for, because when you're on set and you're like, okay, Lauren and Norman, there's a big horde of zombies down there, we'll put them in later. And they're like, okay, they know what a horde of zombies looks like.
Oh my God.
They can imagine it. But when you're telling people like, and there's a giant swarm of locusts, and people are like, what's a locust? What does that look like?
That was the exact response that I had. I could hear the sound. I was like, what the fuck is that? Is that crickets? Is that flies?
And so you're trying to not only figure out how to get people to
visualize,
be on board with a plan that doesn't exist yet. Because, the script is just like, and the swarm of locusts are here, and they hear the locusts, and the locusts are getting closer. And it's purposefully vague so that we don't know if we need to show it or not. But then you get in post and you edit the episode, and you're like, oh, we need to show this. It's called Act of God, and we can't have, the Deus Ex, the lightning bolt that will strike you, the Act of God. It can't be a Deus Ex off screen.
You have to see it.
Real.
Yeah.
Yeah. So So I worked super hard with my team to come up with a proposal and be like, okay, we see them here, but there's only a couple. And then it gets more here. And then I said the moment that has to be the most like ethereal but terrifying is when Leah comes out of the Barrington house on fire,
Yes.
shooting her gun. And I wanted this John Woo moment, but instead of doves, it's giant grasshopper locust monsters just like flying behind her in slow motion. And I'm blown away with how that turned out. I'm so happy with it, and it was a hard thing to plan too, because it's hard to get people on board with something that they can't see. It's hard to show them I know what a bunch of zombies are going to look like. We've seen that before, so it's easy to be like, we'll fill this room with zombies. Cool. But when you're like thousands of locusts, getting people on board with that was very tricky and slow, because you want people to understand, sign off, and be excited about it. But when it's something that's very hard to visualize in the first place, that was tricky. That was really tricky.
I mean, to be fair, it does sound like a kind of weird thing to try and explain to someone. Like, if you have that vision in your head and you know it'll work, but then like you said, you're trying to get people on board with this idea that you can't explain. And with something like that, then I know that when you add or take things in or out of a scene, there's so many things that you have to like leave room for, so things like shadows or stuff like that. But when you're shooting at nighttime, then it changes it as well. So with the swarm, was that harder as well, because you were trying to kind of fix it and tone it down for nighttime?
Yeah, and a lot of times people are like, oh, it can be more forgiving at night, and it can. It's certain there are times, but VFX is always one of those weird things where they're like, is this harder or easier? And the answer is like, yes.
Both. Both is good.
It can be both things at once. Like, yeah, we didn't need to show as many locusts, but we needed to do things differently. And like, there's a shot right at the beginning where they're flying over Hornsby, and there's a body on the ground.
Yeah.
And you realize, why does this look weird? This isn't working. Why isn't it working? It's like, oh, shadows. There's shadows on the ground from natural things that are in the scene. The car is casting shadows. And now we need to do locust shadows. Well, crap, how do we do locust shadows? So they had to sort of build 3D geometry that you don't see to cast shadows onto. And that figuring that out is such a wild thing, because now you're building a truck, sort of, and you're building a Hornsby, sort of, but their only job is to catch the shadows. They're called shadow catcher objects.
So these were practical things that were used to cast shadows?
Well, we built them in CG. So you have to, because the locusts are CG. We have a CG light that's shooting light down, but we needed to catch the shadows. So there's like a truck and a body and Hornsby there. So in a digital world, we built those in CG to cast shadows onto, but literally all you can see is the shadows, and then you comp that into the scene together. So it looks like the shadows are casting down, and that's just a wild amount of work for something that you'll never really think about. You're like, oh, there's bugs there, they cast shadows.
That scene in particular, especially with the house, when the house, what was it? Was it the tripwire, I think it was, that blew up the house? Boom. When it comes to things like that, I know obviously scenes like the bugs, they'd all have to be CG, because you'd have to be one hell of a talented crew to be able to control that many live bugs. But with fire and with explosions and stuff, how much of that scene in particular with the tripwire, how much of that was practical versus post?
All real. All the explosion there was real, and it didn't have. It actually was all like light and sparks and smoke. They did a great job. We couldn't really do a big fireball, but it looks like it because of what they used, and it looks awesome. But then in like 10, 13, we actually had the place on fire, which was cool. That's one of the coolest scenes we've ever shot, was the battle for Hilltop, and there's in the field with the electrical wire, and then at Hilltop itself, and that. I always try to keep fire real as much as we can, because fire is one of those natural elements. Fire, water, smoke are natural elements that for whatever reason people can sense what is real and what isn't. But then when you do it right, it looks great. Like under the bridge, all that water was fake, but it worked out well. It looked great, and it's getting better. The technology is getting better. Fire is one of the hardest ones. Fire is one of the hardest ones, I think, to do. But I think it's getting so close. Like this year, there's that episode, I think 1103 or 4, where Daryl and Leah are trapped in a cabin and it's on fire.
Yeah.
That was all VFX. That was all us. That was a studio called Ingenuity. That's my VFX family. Big shout out to them. They did all these elements, but the fire elements that they used were, for the most part, real video, just not fire there. Everything there was just light and smoke.
Well, I guess when it's up close and personal with actors, you do have to be careful and kind of pick and choose.
Yeah, AMC was like, you want to put Norman in a where with a what? With helmet fire? No.
That's a hard no. Get out. No.
Yeah. The insurance, the lawyers alone were just had a heart attack over that, so we had to figure it out. But like when we did Hilltop on Fire, nobody's in the house, so they built window boxes. The whole thing isn't on fire. Literally, it's only in the windows. So they build these window boxes that can, catch on fire and blast fire at them with like a flame bar. And so every window is fitted with this flame bar window box, and it was burning. But parts of the building actually caught on fire. So every time they yelled cut, the fire department would run in and put out the what had actually caught on fire. And that would take like 30 minutes to do. And then you'd have to like
fix it up
and start over.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is when you realize, I don't think anybody realized like, oh, we don't have as much time. So that night there were a lot of moments where like, well, all that time we thought we were going to have went to the fire department. So now what are you going to do? And we figured it out though. And that's one of my favorite scenes because we did have walkers on fire, and a lot of them are actually on fire, and then VFX added more fire so it felt bigger.
Yeah.
So like his back would be on fire, but like only a little bit, enough so that, safe. I say safe in quotes.
He was only on fire a little bit. He was completely safe. It was just his back, okay?
A stuntman, there's the full body burn where it's like head to toe. It's super dangerous. But like when you put a little bit on them, they can put it out when they, roll on the ground, and they can put it out with a fire extinguisher pretty quickly. So it's safer. Don't try this at home. But we would add lots of fire to them so it looked like they were completely engulfed, and that's ways that we can add to the realism of it. So like there's a scene where they're coming through the gate and they're on fire, and we added fire to those guys. But like my favorite part of that whole burning hilltop scene was the embers that float through the entire scene, and it's like this chaotic beauty that my team got to add. And that was a personal project of mine where I worked with artists to every shot needed something to keep it alive. And that's something that's such a bizarre little thing that seems very natural, and it doesn't draw attention to itself, but I think adds to this chaotic, horrifying beauty of the scene. Like fire is a beautiful, chaotic force, and just these little embers floating through the air throughout the whole scene are all fake, but it adds, I think, so much to it because it makes it kind of magical in a way that I think is really cool.
Yeah, it's like that final finishing touch that just brings it all together.
Yeah.
There's been so many moments throughout the show and throughout the past few seasons. But has there ever been a pitch or anything that was put to you that you thought there is no way that we can do this, but you eventually did? Like, what was the hardest one?
Yeah, every episode there's something that you're like, but like, again, you have to just be excited about it. I don't think you can ever approach something like we can't do that. I think you have to approach it like, wow, I've never done that before. How exciting. Even though you're inside screaming like, what? You want to do what? Like the locust. What? Because I knew we wouldn't, on set, there wouldn't be anything there. It's all VFX. So I knew that was going to be a very difficult thing to have to pull off, and it would all be on a VFX team's shoulders to figure out how to make that work, because what you're doing on set, there's nothing's going to be there, and nothing can fake it either. When we do big zombie scenes, we have like 50, maybe even 100 zombies. So it's not like you're reacting to nothing. There's always something there. So like throwing the walkers off the cliff, doing the blowing up the bridge, like I knew it would be so much work to do, but you just have to get excited by what you don't know, because that's your chance to really learn something, figure something out, and shine. And I loved all that stuff. The heads on spikes, figuring out how to make them
stop.
Come
We're
alive.
not over that to this day. That is one of, there's certain moments throughout the show that will just stick with you. That imagery, oh my God.
Oh, that was one I was just eaten up by all the tears. I was like, oh. So I got to watch that at, I was at Talking Dead for that. I was in the audience, and getting to watch people watch that and just like knowing what's about to happen, I'm just like looking around the room. I'm like, here it comes.
You're like, I can't wait to see the
bawling.
tears. Yes.
Yeah. But it's so striking and it's so good. I love that. I love that episode. The snow, there's a blizzard episode that, again, you're like, how are we going to do this? And they're like, well, we'll have some real snow on set, and we'll have some soap snow, and we'll have some paper snow, and then the rest is all you. And you're like, cool.
That sounds like a lot of different textures, though, to work with.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because it would be different things depending on what you needed to do. So they could bring this soap truck around that would literally just like bubbles everywhere, and that would be for large blanketed areas, but it doesn't last very long. And then they had the real snow for small areas that people needed to interact with, so they'd hose that down with like a snow machine, like literally snow cones, like spraying ice and snow. And then the paper snow would be good for large areas as well, but the paper snow is more expensive than the soap or the ice, because that comes in big bags, and you have to put that out, and then that's dusty. And then we were on the largest soundstage I've ever been in my life. I've been in some pretty big sound stages. At the Trilla Studios, where they film all the Marvel stuff. They built this giant ice set that had the river crossing and the area where Alec built part of Alexandria there for when they're trying to get from the church to the houses, and the shed where Lydia and Carol have this big sort of reckoning moment, and that was all on one big soundstage in this gigantic set, and they just started blowing snow everywhere, and your mind gets confused and you actually get cold even though the snow is there, which is the weirdest thing.
That scene is probably one of my favorite visuals probably in all of the show, especially the end. I loved the frozen walkers because I always say it about The Walking Dead, like, as you progress with the show, you always think you're going to get sick of the walkers, or you're going to get, like, it's like, oh, it's a walker. But you keep reinventing them. You keep coming up with new ways to show them. But the icicle walkers was one of the most weirdly creative, like, shouldn't work, but makes total sense to see.
And we had to come up with a new way to kill them. So normally, Michonne slashes them and blood sprays and they die. Well, now we were like, when they're frozen, we want them to crumble a little bit. So it's just a little bit of an extra texture, like you said, like that crumbling, and that took a lot of R&D to figure out. How do you make an ice walker crumble? And like when you shatter them, we wanted a little bit of extra crunchiness to it, and creating that. And I think you can see it on screen, but a lot of work went into something that's very, very nuanced. And I think it's super cool. And one of the things I'm so proud about that episode, just the fact that it's a really cool episode, but the breath. I think a lot of times when you watch a movie or a TV show and they're like, it's cold, and the cold breath is like constant, and I think people constantly troll Social Network for having the worst cold breath you've ever seen. I was really proud of how we did it, because I think it's very subtle, and the way that my strategy for it was, you begin a scene and you see the breath a couple times, and then you lessen it so that in the middle of the scene it's barely there. You barely see it. So it goes away, but you have already established that it's cold. Every time they talk, you don't need to see a breath. That saves on the number of shots you do, and it also doesn't attract attention to itself. And then at the end of the scene, you do like one or two more visible
to
so
just
that people are
reinforce
like,
it.
It's cold, I get it. But like that's the problem when you watch a movie. When it's cold, every time they talk, there's breath, and you're like, that's too much, and it's for whatever reason doesn't seem right. So that was my approach, and we actually got a lot of, like, one of my oddly more proud comments I got. Somebody was like, man, they did it better than Game of Thrones. I was like, thank you. So
every single breath was post.
Yeah.
Dude,
yeah.
I had no, like, I'm not just saying it, I had no idea that that's the level that has to go into something like that. Like I said, that there will be things here and there that you probably mightn't pick up on, or that might get past you, but down to that detail?
Oh, and you have to figure out what syllable the breath comes out on. So when somebody's like, hi, H's will produce more breath than a O. Like
oh my God.
You come up with the syllable that the breath comes out on and how it dissipates. Like we get notes on that. So here's a process that I don't think people realize is, so when we get an edit, they give us the edit, and we figure out, okay, in this edit, Norman kills a walker. So he slashes the VFX knife. It's a knife that's just halfway. You know, it's not a full knife, and it has a pad on there. So he swings the padded knife. Okay, we're going to have to extend the blade, and we're going to have to figure out how this kill looks. We send it out to our vendors. We get a bid. How much is it going to cost? We figure that out. Everybody approves that. And, you know, it goes through a chain every time. Producers, executive producers. Everybody says, okay, this is what it's going to cost. Great. And then we send it to the vendor, and the artists work on it. Multiple artists work on it. There's somebody who tracks it, somebody who creates the knife, somebody who creates the wound and the blood simulations, and then they hand it to a compositor, and the compositor takes the blood, the knives, everything, all the separate pieces, and layers it together to make the final shot. And they send it back to us, and we go, you know what, I don't think this works, and this little drop of blood here, and it goes through all those people again, and they all get to put their notes in, and then we send the notes back to the vendor, and that goes 3 or 4 times, 5 times, 26 times, 28 times, 50 times.
So anytime anything's changed, it has to go through all those levels again?
Yeah, and then it comes back, and finally somebody goes, okay, it's fine. And then it goes in the show and gets color corrected and put on TV. And, you know, some things it's really quick. A Darrow kill is usually pretty easy because it's like, okay, we need a zombie, we need a wound, we need blood. But for something like the mask, when Lydia takes her mother's mask and throws it off the cliff, that's a big CGI shot. And how that looks and how it turned and how it waved in the wind.
And the hair
so
and
important.
everything.
Yeah, that's so important that there were a lot of notes on it. And every time they gave a note, there's a 9-hour simulation that has to be run for the hair. So every note was 9 hours. And we went through like 4 or 5 versions of that. So it's
Holy crap.
The time that goes into it. And, you know, sometimes the notes are very constructive and sometimes the notes are maddening where I'm just like, really? That's what we're picking on? But it's fine. You know, it's all part of the process and you just get used to it.
Well, for the mask, it definitely paid off because that moment,
So cool.
the walkers going over the edge was cool. I think like the emotions going on in the background with Carol and Lydia, that was a lot too. But the mask, like that it was like the final goodbye as she went over the edge. That was so beautiful.
It's one of those moments that's so important. And, you know, one of the funny things that I thought was so brilliant, and this is to the, you know, how interesting collaborating is, you know, Angela, the showrunner, and she wrote that episode, and I was like, why don't we get to see the splat? I want to see thousands of walkers hitting the ground. She's like, that's not what the moment's about. And I was kind of like bummed out about that. I had a chip on my shoulder about that for a while, and then I saw the final edit. It's like, oh, she's right. We don't need to see the carnage. The carnage is not important. That would actually make it a different scene altogether.
You changed the tone.
I think it would have been cool for me, but what it was for the whole thing and what it was for the characters, Carol, and what it was for, you know, Lydia, wow, suddenly it's about them. And I was like, I learned something by that it's not always about the splat. It's not always about the blood. It's about there can be emotion in this horror elements. And even though you're throwing thousands of zombies off the cliff, that kind of becomes this, like, you know, part of the metaphor. And I was like, okay, I learned something there. That's really cool. And I think that's a scene that, for all the hell that we went through to get it done, I'm so happy that it turned out the way it did.
Yeah, dude, it was so beautiful. It really did. It did give that kind of sense of closure to it. And I think, yeah, I think not showing them, I get what you're saying, that you wanted the splat, you wanted the big at the end, like, but for that kind of, it was still, there was so much going on in it, but there was an element of stillness to it as well.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah, and the music, I mean, holy cow,
my God.
music. I think it's one of those things, too, that's like, if you had shown the splat, it might have almost been comedic, where it's like, oh, Carol, I saved you. Oh, Lydia, I'm being this mother figure.
In the background, then just blood squirting up from the little valley.
It would have been, I don't know, I probably would have cracked up, but it worked, you know, it worked. And that was just, you know, and the scene's beautiful, and the setting was beautiful, but where we shot that, the cliff was 8 feet high, and we just had a giant blue screen dug into the side of the dirt. They literally built that cliff.
So the cliff wasn't real either? I know the walkers didn't go over the edge, but the cliff wasn't real either?
No, the cliff was an 8-foot, like, ditch that we had dug out of the side of a farm field. It's the same field that the helicopter took Rick from. It's literally the same field. I don't think you guys realize how we shoot everything in the exact same spot. Like everything.
No, I think I'm learning today that everything I've seen has been a lie. I'm like, the breathing is done afterwards. The breathing isn't even real.
Yeah.
Holy hell.
So, yeah, everything there is... so they carved the cliff out of a little farm field. And the stunt people went over the cliff. We had about 8 stunt people who, like, did the drop. But then we replicated them in CGI over and over and over and over.
For you, it must be amazing seeing people not pick up on it. But then once... Like, I think I would be looking at episodes differently now. I'd be like... Is that real? Or is that... Because I know, like, with the herds, I know you do have to take, like, a few kind of core people and then duplicate or multiply to, you know, add a little bit of depth or whatever. But I didn't know that it was even things down to, like, little cliffs or... Like, I didn't even know that the snow scene was completely not even filmed where it usually is.
Right? And so, I mean, the zombie scenes are... obviously, we don't have thousands of people. We have 50 to 100, usually. In the scene in the hospital parking lot where Beta has the horde and they're walking through the horde, it's this really tense scene. You know, our heroes are all gutted up and they're walking through the horde and Beta's constricting the herd on them. We only had like 50. Some days we had 100. So when you need to fill that scene with more walkers, a person's job is to rotoscope, which is trace every walker in that scene, and you already have 50 people there, so the gaps you're tracing are very intricate just so we can put more people behind them. And so that turned into a huge endeavor of just so many walkers needed to make that scene feel as big as it was. And again, one of those ones I just like can't believe we pulled it off with what we did. And that's, you know, a testament to how good the teams are that we bring on to this. But you know, it's a lot of work that we put them through. And it's like I said, I'm on set and I'm like, oh no, I'm already feeling bad for whoever has to do this. But I know they're going to pull it off because we try to bring in the best teams we can.
Well, it for sure does pay off, because scenes like that, like I said, the beta scene with the herd, I just would have presumed that was just 200 or 300 extras or however many that you would have had. But
Yeah.
Man, I can't imagine having to copy and paste or fill in every little thing. Obviously, with the show, well, where we are now, the mid-season just aired, so we still have part C, section C to air. Yeah. But for you guys, it's over. You filmed, you've wrapped and everything.
Wrap party was on Saturday. I just got over the hangover.
Dude, I mean, for audiences, for viewers, we kind of, I think it was 2020, it was announced that the show was ending or in and about. So I feel like for us, it was kind of like a gradual... Okay, like, you know, we'll get used to the idea of it coming to an end. But for you guys, it was just like one last day of set, and then it's like, well, you're done now.
Yeah. So we were still working on the finale, the 10/16 finale, when they announced that it was going to end, that this would be the last season. And then they announced that it was going to be 24 episodes. And they announced that we were doing these 6 extra episodes for season 10. So suddenly I have 30 episodes about to hit me with no break, and you're like, whoa, that's a lot. A lot of work. And it has been a marathon. Like I said, had a baby, now I have a 1-year-old. You know, people have come and gone. We had, you know, Steve Campbell, RIP, one of our longest DPs on the show, he passed away. There's so many milestones that we went through together as a team, and then suddenly you do one last shot. It was a VFX shot, by the way. Last shot was a VFX shot. Go us. And then it's over, and it's bittersweet because it's so exhausting at this point to have gone that long, that you're like, I'm ready. I'm so ready for it to be done. But at the same time, you're like, oh no, I'm never going to see that crew again. Oh no, on cold days, I'm not going to have Tony's soup. Oh no, catering. Where's Crafty? I don't have Crafty at my house. Like all the things that you miss, and then it's like all the people that you miss, like. You know, even the cranky people, you're like, I love them. They're so cranky. Yeah. You know, even, you know, the nice people you miss your friends. You're going to miss working with them. You're going to miss the nuances. You're going to miss the inside jokes. You're going to miss, you know, the AD tripping on things. Not so fast, JJ. Like, you're going to miss all those fun sort of things that come up when you work with a crew that closely for that long. And then, you know, we have the wrap party, and everybody partied hard, and it was super fun. And now I'm in post, you know, we still have a ways to go to finish it up. we're currently working on 17. Like the next episode you guys see after the finale, that's what we're working on right now, and then we still have the last of the 11C stuff to go. But it's different, it's all going to be remote, and post is just a different vibe. Super fun, super cool, but
not
being
the
on
same.
set and being in that energy is so addicting to me.
I can't imagine what it feels like being in it, because I know the last few days, or the last week really, I know all the cast and crew have been posting like their goodbye messages or like selfies or behind the scenes photos from set, and everybody, any friends of mine who's into the show or whatever, everyone's saying the same thing. They're like, if we're being hit hard, what do they feel like? Like, I can't imagine saying goodbye to an era in that way.
Yeah, and it's one of those shows that I think is, I'm proud to have a spot in a legacy, a show that showed that you could put zombies on television, showed that horror worked as a genre, a show that I think paved the way for everything that we see now. Marvel wasn't the Marvel juggernaut that is now, and I think Walking Dead showed you can do this, and you can do it with real characters, and you can do it with real quality that I don't think people ever expected. I still think that the pilot episode, the first episode of the first season, one of the best things ever put on television. I stand by that. If somebody ever asks, and it's not just because I worked on the show, I felt that way since it aired. I think it's one of the best introductions to characters you've ever seen done. And, the show's had its ups and downs for sure, but I think we're ending on a high note, and I think we're ending the season in a way that it's good to say goodbye, and I think it's going to be okay.
Bittersweet, I guess, is the best way.
Yeah.
But like with the show like this, like I said earlier, I absolutely hated zombies. I loved horror, hated zombies. And I think you have a weird tie into this, but I'm not sure. So I didn't watch The Walking Dead as it aired. I think season 5 was airing when I got into it. Got completely hooked, binged all 5 seasons, and then caught up with it live, and I've been with it ever since. I'm a bit of a fan. I don't know if you've noticed. I like it a small bit. I don't like to brag though. Like, I'm only a part-time viewer. But I hated zombies. They were the one thing in the horror genre that freaked me out, and it's because of a movie called I Am Legend, which I read somewhere that you worked on, and I was like, no way.
Yeah, so I Am Legend is one of my worst experiences ever with a film. So
me too. It scarred me forever.
Right? So like I said, I wanted to make monsters. I wanted to be in it, and I got a job at a special effects house called Creature Effects, and I was working on I Am Legend with my roommate at the time. He was a foam runner, and I was just a mold maker. I was literally like shop sweep. I was sweeping things up, going on runs, but I wanted to be a sculptor. I wanted to do this, and I was learning, and we're on this big movie. How awesome is that? And then one day they come in, they said, everybody gather up. They're going digital. We all lost our jobs. So 150 people lost their jobs because they wanted to go CGI after we had already been filming for almost 3 months. And I got to tell you, the practical stuff was one of the coolest things I had ever seen, because they got these super skinny dancers to be the, people with body contortion to be the vampire creatures, and they put muscle makeup on them. And then they put clear skin over that muscle makeup. So that's why they were super skinny to begin with. So you could see through their skin, and then they covered them with mud. And the scene that I saw them sort of do a test on was, it's raining and the mud washes off and you can see through their skin, and it was real. And that blew my mind.
It scarred me.
And the fact that they were like, that they're going to go CGI now, I was like, what? So everybody lost their jobs except for me, because I was the lowest of the lowest on the totem pole. So they're like, Aaron, you have to clean this all up. So literally everybody just left their desks as they were, and I cleaned everything up. And it took almost 3 months of me and like one other PA basically to package everything up, put it in boxes. So like I Am Legend was one of the weirdest experiences, but it was one of those things that made me go, oh, I've lost my job to a computer. I better figure that computer thing out. And it kept happening. I kept losing my jobs to computers. And so when the writer's strike hit in 2008, I desperately tried to figure out VFX. So I sold my car, I bought a computer, and I taught myself visual effects. And that, like, I Am Legend put me on that path because it
was
was
a
like
driving
so
force.
heart-wrenching to lose my job to a computer. I was like, I better get on that computer thing, figure it out.
That's wild. Now the computer's your bestie. It's where you do all the best work.
Yeah, it's amazing. But I will always go back to this. And this on the show has been a great marriage of that. What is real will always take you farther than what is fake. And if you can build something off of something that's real, then it's more believable than something that's 100% fake. And this show is such a practical driven show that I get to work with that a lot more. And I have, Greg Nicotero and the K&B team are so incredible about what they can bring practically. It makes our job go further. It makes the effects look better because we're building off of something that's there. And that I think is something that people need to realize. And I think people need to work with that when they're doing movies. And like the practicality of it will always take you farther than something that's just 100% CGI.
And I do think it blends nicer as well when you do just kind of, like you said, it's a marriage between the two, between how well they blend, how well they mold together, and they do feed off each other. But getting back to like movies and shows and stuff, obviously they're very different formats, very different experiences. With a show, it's a much larger commitment. With the movie, it's very clean cut, you're in and out. When it comes to that kind of setting a tone or being involved in something, do you prefer settling in and like that, getting to know the little kind of production family that you become a part of, or do you like the new perspectives of movie hopping?
I love TV. I love TV because TV is fast. TV has to get on the air. Whereas a movie, they can hold on to a movie for years. And I worked on a crappy film that, like 2 years later, I got a call and they're like, hey, we need more VFX for this movie. And I was like, I'm not working on that. I'm like, I delivered that years ago.
It still wasn't out?
It hadn't come out yet. And like, so here's what happens is you'll shoot a movie and they'll sit on it because it's not very good or whatever the reason. And then one of the actors in that movie will suddenly be like, oh, I have a good movie that came out, and they'll release that movie just to like get on the coattails of it. Happens all the time, and movies can drag on forever, whereas a television show has to get on the air. There's no stopping that air date. So that's the thing I love about TV is good or bad, it will get on the air, and there is an end in sight. And so I like TV. I like that, and I like to be entrenched with people as opposed to the chaos of a movie, because when you start in with new people, new egos, new things to figure out, new quirks and nuances, it's never easy. So it's like when you can work with somebody and you show up the next day and you know what they're going to be like and you know who you're working with and you know how it's going to be. I like TV for that.
I could totally get that, and I think I would have the same kind of outlook of not having to figure out the new dynamics each time, that you do just kind of settle into your role. But one last question for you. So given what you do and how your view of media in general is altered, it is different from someone, say, like me. I love getting like absolutely nothing. I hardly watch trailers for things because I don't want to know anything. I want to go into it completely with a fresh perspective. But for you, if you're going to see a movie or a show that you're not a part of, that you just want to watch for you, does having your background, does it ruin film and TV for you? Because instead of focusing on the story, you're focusing on everything else.
Yeah, I'm told that I'm annoying to watch movies with, because I'll be like, the one take. If somebody's doing a one take where they do this massive oneer, where the camera never cuts,
the continuous shots,
and there's secret cuts. Like obviously, I think one of the more famous ones is Children of Men. They have these really long takes where it's like they don't cut away. I get super amped up on that where I'm like, they haven't cut yet. Oh, they've been going for 3 minutes and they haven't cut yet. Oh, and my wife's like, what are you talking about? Because a lot of people don't notice the edits, and I'm noticing edits. I'm noticing the pacing. I'm noticing what they're doing. I notice the CGI. I notice when CGI is good. Really bizarre things like when there's like clones on screen, like duplicates, where it's like There's a show, Paul Rudd. I think it's like Fighting with Myself or Living.
Oh,
with
Living
Myself.
with Myself, dude! I loved that. Yeah, yeah.
I can't watch. I still can't tell you the plot of that show because I'm like, whoa, wait. He's holding his hand while punching himself in the face while there's a reflection in the mirror. Whatever Happened to Monday, this awesome movie on Netflix, had like 7 clones, and there's scenes where I'm just like, wow, how did they do that? Like, I'm super annoying to watch movies with because I keep like, I'm like, can I rewind that? And it's like, why? And it's like, did you miss the line? No, I just want to see if I can see where they hid the edit or hid the composite, you know. And we live in a weird time though where it's like, I used to watch horror movies like John Carpenter's The Thing because the effects are so good. I don't watch Marvel and be like, man, Thanos looks really good. He just does. It's a given. They have enough money that the effects are just good.
They have the budget. You know it's going to be good. Yeah.
So it's almost not impressive when they have like 30,000 things flying through the air fighting each other. Even though I know that that's a really hard thing to do. And I know that years went into a shot like that. Like, silly movie, but Space Jam 2. There's a scene where there's thousands of cartoon characters. And I know that took almost 4 years to make. It just goes by and you're like, yeah, there's a bunch of cartoon characters. They're cool. Like, it doesn't impress you the same way that, like, the practicality will or, like, a nuance of a VFX does. I get access to all the VES submissions, which is the Visual Effects Society, so I get to see a lot of the really cool behind-the-scenes stuff. And it's like Loki was one of the ones that was up for an award this year. And it's like, cool, but, you know, anybody with a lot of money can have talking alligators.
Yeah.
It's an impressive alligator, and the people who worked hard on it did a great job. But I'm more impressed with the nuts and bolts work when, I don't love the show, but it's called The Nevers. There's a fight scene in it that I think was one of the best things that had been done this year, and it's a guy who can walk on water fighting a woman who doesn't have that ability, and she's under the water trying to swim away from him, and he can walk on the water, and he's swinging this chain down. That was all done with, like, hard nuts and bolts, green screen work, and trampoline work and water simulation work, and it was just sheer nuts and bolts. The new Candyman movie, that scene where he walks around the car and in every window is a different reflection of the former versions of himself, that wasn't done with CGI. It's done with compositing, but it was hard nuts and bolts VFX work. Last Night in Soho, all the stuff where her reflection is a different version of her, that is hard work and hard planning. Those are the things that I respond more to than just like, yeah, you threw a lot of money and a lot of hard CGI work. But it's like when you can figure out a trick and figure out how VFX can make that trick work because you are planning ahead in a very meticulous way, that's the stuff I respond to and get all oh, we have to rewind and watch that 9 times.
I guess it's stuff that you haven't seen a million times either, because like you said, with like the armies or with like the space fights and stuff, you know what you're getting. But like with the kind of smaller, more intimate scenes that maybe you haven't seen a million times, I could understand why you would absolutely freak out over something like that.
There's a very subtle effect that we did for when Beta's walking around with Alpha's head. Mm-hmm. It's not necessarily hard VFX. We shoot. Samantha Morton was there, and we put a blue bib on her and just removed her body. But that was some of the ones that I think are so beautiful, like when he holds his head to hers after he killed her. It's one of my favorite shots. I'm watching it filmed and I'm crying, and they're like, I think it's going to be a good VFX shot, because I was like so moved by how cool it's going to be. And sure enough, like when it's put together, it's this beautiful moment. And like when Carol puts her head on the spike and it's still moving, how we did that was we put Samantha Morton on a chair that raised and lowered, and we kind of like it was 2 different people wearing Carol's gloves, one on one side, one on the other side of the camera, and then the chair lowered, and then we CGI'd the spike going into her head. So that's how we it's a very simple trick, but that's how we made a moving head go onto a spike.
So she was there, but the spike wasn't.
The spike wasn't, yeah, exactly. And to make the motion, because we couldn't necessarily move her, like nobody could hold the head and move her like that. So we just moved the chair and it lowered into frame. So when it looks like it's somebody's hands bringing something down, in reality, she's the only piece moving.
That's nuts. I thought it was the other way around. I would have thought that it was like a CG head or like an animatronic head.
Yeah.
That just would have been placed on the spike, but it was the reverse.
As we found, it's very difficult to do that close up because it has to look like the person. And the CGI of that gets very tricky, because even when it's off of them, their scan, everything, you could have it look exactly like them. There's something about a fully digital head that's just slightly off.
Yeah.
And when it's that close up, it has to be perfect. Like when we did the heads on spikes, that's the last time that person's ever going to be on film. It has to be perfect. And that's so hard to do. And so we needed to nail it. And so I needed her to be there for that. And I needed her to be acting for that, because you're this close on her face. So it made sense to do it that way. Can I throw out a few things that I'm proud of for the show?
Of course, that was one of my questions. Of course, your proudest moments or things that really will stick with you.
Scott Wilson's last scene. Big time, Herschel. When he's in 905 saying goodbye to Rick, he's just we're in a barn set where they built it on stage and they put a big blue screen out there. I got to go out with Tommy Harris. Big shout out to Tommy Harris. He's the data wrangler on our show. He's the guy who collects all the camera data, but he also flies the drone many times. And he and I went out to the hill where Rick and Negan had their fight with the stained glass window.
Yeah.
We went out. We shoot there all the time. That's the same place where the heads on spikes are. Literally the trees on the other side of the hill.
So you really do just keep it all within the same 3 fields.
Yeah. The funny thing is that is the tallest field in the area, and that's like an hour south of where we shoot. But yeah, it's we reuse the same thing over and over again. So we go out to the top of that hill because it's going to have the best sunset, and we take the drone up, and we had, it's like the universe knew that this was going to be a special moment, and we had the best sunset I think I've ever seen, and we got some amazing drone footage of the sun setting, and we just comped that in, and it's a stunning shot. It's a stunning shot, and it's so subtle, but that's the last moment he ever acted, and we got to be a part of that, and that will always be special to me. Anything in 905, I think that's my favorite episode of The Walking Dead ever, next to the pilot, because we got to do such cool stuff, and to meet Bernthal, get to do that scene where we re-enter Atlanta and do some of these crazy, the Field of the Dead.
Dude, that was nuts. That whole episode was it was a credit to you.
It's insane. So that stuff I will always be super proud of. And then, getting to go through the Whisper War and do some really cool stuff for that, because those were some of the weirdest characters that I was like, it works in a comic book, but can you pull that off in real life? And I think we did, and getting to do those scenes and I think really bring some of that stuff. One of the things I'm super proud of is I got to design a lot of things for The Walking Dead, logos, kind of like the shirt you're wearing right now.
What, this shirt?
Yeah.
No, I just threw this on. I had no idea. What?
I designed it for, Angela was like, hey, you do graphics, right? I was like, yeah. And she's like, do you want to try some logos? And so I did about 20 of them. And she picked that one. And then AMC called and they're like, hey, you made that on company time, so we own that. But we're going to give you some credit, and we'll pay you a little bit extra, a little bonus for it, but we're going to use it on everything. Literally.
Yeah, that was the logo. It was everywhere.
It's on the posters. I don't have it here. It's back in LA, but I have the awesome shot. It was a promo picture that they pulled out, and it's Carol, Michonne, and Daryl on the cliff with all the walkers below them with the big X above them, and that's like one of those. I have it signed by the whole cast, and I was like, that is one of my coolest things that I have, and I'm so proud of being able to do that and go to Comic-Con and see the logo that you made on everything, just everywhere. It was on the posters. They used it for everything, and just that, that I have shirts and hats with that on there, and I'm just so happy that that's a cool thing. That's a cool feather in my hat that I'll always take with me. Getting to do Michonne's last episode, one of the things I consider myself to be kind of like an expert at is like, when somebody's like, we're doing something trippy, do some trippy stuff, and she has that trip, and it's always hilarious because everyone every time goes, go nuts, do whatever you want, and you're like, okay, and you have like the walls melting and everything, and it's going crazy, and then they realize, oh, I don't want that, and so it ends up just being like a color tweak where like everything's a little bit brighter,
and it's like, okay, so you said go crazy, but clearly you didn't mean it. That's a lot of power for one person to have. Go crazy, and you're there like, right.
Yes. It's happened on multiple shows where they're like, go nuts, and I go nuts, and they're like, dial it back, dial it more back. let's dial it even more back. And by the end, it's literally just like the reds are brighter, and that's it.
Or you just throw a filter on it, and you're like, "Whoa, crazy! There you go. Is this what you wanted?"
Yeah, they don't know how crazy it can get. But we got to go a little crazy with Michonne's last thing. Comping her into old footage of the lineup was so cool.
That's
so cool.
I'm not even joking. That episode, that was nuts. But I remember that was in the trailer. There was a scene. It was her with she was holding Lucille straight out to the camera.
Yep.
Minds were blown. None of us knew. We couldn't make like head nor tail of like what in the love of God is she doing with Lucille. That was insane. So, did you have to go back and use the footage that you already had, or was all of it like from scratch?
50-50. So there were a lot of pieces that we used a lot of the real stuff, but here's the problem with the old footage. Michonne is in the lineup, so we had to paint her out and shift people over. So if you go back and look at it, the lineup's in a different order. So we had to paint people out and then shift things around so it made sense. And then you had to make that make sense with the shadows that existed there. So when we put her into the front of the lineup, she's out of the lineup. We shift everybody around. We had to paint the blood off Rick's face because at that point in the footage that we had, they had already hit Abraham, I think. So we painted the blood off of Rick's face for all those scenes. We had to mix it around, and then we had to make her shadow match up with somebody else who had originally been in that scene. So she's walking, and the shadow isn't hers, but you can't tell because it worked out. So then she bends down and gets right in Rick's face. So we had to paint the blood out and make sure that that all lined up, matched the color and the lighting of it all. And then we reshot pieces of Jeffrey talking so that the angle on them, it all lined up. But then, you needed the light temperatures to match. You wanted the light to have that same richness. You wanted the lens flares to match. Everything had a haze throughout the original scene, so we had to put some of the shots, put that haze back in digitally, so it all kind of matched. And it overall, I think it worked. There's definitely a lot of tricks to be done to make it work, but the old footage was pretty tricky to do. There's a scene where like they had like Heath and I think it's Glenn go in and stab somebody in the night. Mm-hmm. And we redid pieces of that where Michonne is like escaping the gunfight. Oh
yeah, the Sleeping Saviors situation.
Yeah. So we had original footage from that we had to kind of recreate to make sense, and that had its own tricks. And the footage had like there's a shot of Rick firing a gun, and Michonne, we had her ducking out of the way. To make that match, I recorded him firing the gun from the original footage. And I used that as a source practically on set. We literally held up a TV so that his gunfire lit her up and matched the timing from the original footage.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So I took that footage and I blurred it out. So it literally was just flashes, like doo, 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 from him firing close up.
How big was the TV?
Probably a 30-inch, something like that. But we just held it right off frame, and it just needed to be enough to like light her up a little bit from the muzzle flashes.
Yeah.
And that's how we did that shot, and she ducks out of the way, and the timing and the audio matched to the original footage. So it was really interesting to like take apart the old show and
rework
it was cool. It was really cool. That's stuff that I'm always going to be like super stoked on.
I think that's it for my questions. Is there anything else that you wanted to add in, that you wanted to shout out? This is your moment. You've had a hell of a roller coaster. 2 years?
Yeah. I mean, well, I've been on the show since season 9, so it's like 4 years, 3 seasons.
Yeah, but since pandemic times, I feel like everything has just...
Yeah, it feels like forever.
Yeah.
I have to give a big shout out to... Tommy Harris, my data wrangler, he and I kind of were the two-man team out on set, and I couldn't have done it without him. He's just an incredible, he's better at that job than I ever was. So big shout out to Tommy Harris for making that happen and just being my guy, getting it done. Jamie Cernich, who is my VFX producer, she really stepped up. She was a coordinator when I first started, and Jason Sachs, also a shout out to him, was my producer for season 9, but he moved up the ranks, and she had a chance to step into the role, and she just killed it. I cannot say how much I appreciate her for just kicking ass at job and getting it done. And our VFX editors, Kristen Pels, big shout out to her, and Mike Guerra, who's doing it now. Those guys have just been fantastic. Everybody from my team and the vendors, Ghost VFX has been our primary vendor for a lot of this stuff. Big shout out to them. And then Ingenuity, like I said, I've been with Ingenuity for years, since Blackish, since Taylor Swift, since, and they got me this job. So big shout out to Ingenuity.
Did you just say Taylor Swift?
Oh yeah, I did. I worked on, I not a big part, but I did graphics for Look What You Made Me Do, Ready For It, and Delicate.
That has changed things. I know I was like, okay, I'll wrap things up, and I don't know if you're pushed for time or not.
Go ahead,
dude. Yeah, I'm trying to like be cool about it and play it down. You think I love The Walking Dead? Double it and then turn it up to 100. That's the level of Taylor Swift obsessed. It's weird. Wait, did you say Look What You Made Me Do?
Yeah, that was the first one I did. Well, and Out of the Woods, but I didn't really do anything for Out of the Woods. That one's. But look what you made me do for that. There's just like graphics. Like I'm a graphic artist by that's like what I can do myself. I do a lot of like really cool graphics. So there's a scene where she's like talking to all her army, and they're all like these plastic army people, and there's a cat. And like graphics, she sent me a picture of her cat, and I did the animation for the cat, and then did help with the editorial on basically just when they would send VFX, I'd cut them into the episode and then get those ready for exports and stuff. So a lot of like technical administration stuff, but it's still a fun project. Hard.
That's nuts, and that was, dude, that's huge. Look What You Made Me Do was the start of the Reputation era, and that, I don't know how much you actually know about like the lore of the albums and whatnot, but that music video was like astronomical. And were you drawn to it because of like the zombie aspect? Because it starts off with her.
Starts with the zombie. It was literally just so I worked for Ingenuity Studios, who did all her videos, and they were kind enough to bring me on and give me a chance when I had been a VFX supervisor and then was kind of without a home. I didn't have a job, and they were like, come on, you can work for us. So they brought me in. It was kind of a political hire at first, but then, we figured things out, and they became VFX family. And so I worked with them for years, and they started sending me to set. And so when Walking Dead was need a VFX supervisor, they're like, send Aaron. He loves that stuff. Aaron loves all that nerdy shit. And so I can't thank them enough, and they've been working on the show ever since. But they had been doing Taylor Swift videos for a while, and so I just got to they're like, hey, we need this cat made, or like for Ready For It, where they needed like the techno gack that was in a lot of the she's like a robot fighting robots, and she touches the cage, and like all this techno sort of graphics happen. So I got to do those things, and it was cool. For Delicate, she gets this like magical piece of paper that makes her invisible. I got to do all the sparkle like magic off the piece of paper.
No way.
Yeah,
that's one of my favorite music videos ever. I think that is gorgeous.
I bet you can't believe how hard it is to do VFX in the rain. That scene where it's raining and she's dancing on the car. So they had like pads and stuff so that she could roll down the car safely in the rain, and then you have to paint that out. So what you have to do is remove the rain digitally, remove the pads, put the car back in digitally, and put rain on top of that. So it's so much extra work, but it looks great. So they did.
You wouldn't even know to look at it, because she does the splits down the windscreen, isn't it?
Yeah. So they had safety equipment to help do that, because cars aren't easy to slide down.
Cars are sharp.
yeah. As much as she made it look effortless, but yeah, cars are full of sharp, ouchy, pointy, pokey things. So there were safety equipment on there and pads, and they had to paint all that out in the rain. And it's one of those ones where you see it and you're like, oh, how are you going to do that? It's like, you got to figure it out.
You've just blown my mind. Like, I can't even believe that.
Yeah. It was fun. Yeah, those were fun. A lot of work, though. Oh, my God. Those are those... If you think television is fast and quick and difficult, like music videos, they want them immediately. And, there's so much involved to go into it. And big egos. Oh my God. Not even her. She's honestly has always been super pleasant to that team, and super appreciative and always super excited about it. I didn't have any interaction with her personally, but there's a lot of people making that who have a lot invested, and it's like agents and the directors.
A lot
and
of
all these
moving
people who are
parts.
Like, it needs to be perfect. So you need to please a lot of parties, and I think at the end of the day, like the talent is the one that's like, oh, freaking awesome! You guys made me look great. They're the ones who are easiest to please and excited about it, and it's everybody else that around it that makes it, very intense.
I know, especially right now, it must be a really, really emotional time for you and everybody that's going through with the kind of after effects of settling in. I'd say now that everything is wrapped, what you created, and I speak solely from a fan's point of view, like what you created, it means the world to so many people, but it must be weird knowing now it will live on through streaming services, through box sets, through merch. It's around forever. So before we finish, I just wanted to say thank you so much for putting so much blood, sweat and tears into it. Like throughout all of it, and particularly throughout the last, since everything kickstarted, say with the pandemic, because I know that could not have been easy. I can't imagine trying to hit deadlines, trying to hit everything, balancing personal, family life. Dude, just thank you so much for taking the time to do all that you did, and for sitting down with me for an hour and a half and just blabbing away and talking away. I really do appreciate it.
No, thank you. It's a pleasure. Like I said, I've always been a fan of the reaction videos, and you especially have always been somebody that you can always go to see how the episode turned out. So please keep doing it, and I really appreciate you showing so much love for the show, and inviting some of us behind the scenes stooges out to talk about it. So thank you,
dude. I love getting to hear all the stories, and I want to hear. No, go on.
I want to give one more shout out to my podcast. I have a podcast called The Launchpad Pod. We do talk nerd stuff. Usually it's like, would the Punisher beat Jason Voorhees in a fight? But
he absolutely would. But okay.
Yeah. Me and my college roommate from back in the day, we've been doing it for about 3 years. We've gotten to interview like the writer of Jaws, the voice of Ghostface from Scream. Dolph Lundgren came on the show once, so we've had some fun. And every other week we release a new episode. Our latest episode, we tried to figure out what songs have forever been changed by a movie or a TV show. So like, I can't not hear Stuck in the Middle with You without thinking about razor blades and ears getting cut off. And I'm sure a lot of our Walking Dead fans can't hear Space Junk without thinking of Rick Grimes. So stuff like that. We have fun.
Or Carry On My Wayward Son.
Yes. Ooh, that's a good one too. But yeah, hit us up. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at LaunchpadPod, and our website, launchpadpod.com.
What I'll get you to do is I'll get you to either DM me or message me a link or a little document, say, with all the links that you want, and I'll put them in the description of the Dropbox below so people can find you wherever it is that you're chilling.
Awesome. Well, Katie O'Shaughnessy.
That's me. You got it right.
Thank you so much for having me on. This has been a pleasure.
No bother at all, my love. Thank you so much for taking the time. And that is it for this chat, you guys. I hope you enjoyed. Man, that was just, that didn't even feel like an interview. That felt like a legitimate chat. I had questions and I didn't think I went through half of them because we were just vibing. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. The link to all of Aaron's socials, podcasts and all that fun stuff will be down in the Dropbox down below. Be sure to check him out and give him a follow. And all the links to my stuff is also down below. My Patreon, all that, Twitter, Instagram. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Again, thank you so much to Aaron for sitting and chatting. And I will talk to you all soon.